Usually, airplanes belong in the sky or at the airport. But sometimes we find the abandoned machines in places we never would have expected. Here's the thing, each of these winged skeletons has its own unique story to tell. What led to the aircraft being abandoned and left to fend for itself? What dramatic incidents may have taken place here? Together with you, we'd like to take a closer look at 10 lonely airplane wrecks today and uncover their exciting backgrounds. Have you ever heard of an orphaned plane that was rediscovered in an unusual place? Feel free to leave us a like and a subscription, and write it in the comments now. The most exciting and informative comments will get a heart from us and will be pinned at the top. KITTYHAWK. The year is 1942, when Dennis Coping rises above the hot desert sands of the Sahara aboard his Curtiss P-40 KITTYHAWK. The 24-year-old Briton was actually supposed to fly the plane to another base for repairs, but he never got there. For the next almost 70 years, both Dennis and his plane were considered irretrievably lost. This was to change only in 2012, when the employees of an oil company tracked down the wreckage completely unexpectedly in the middle of the desert. After all this time, the KITTYHAWK was still in astonishingly good condition, and the urgent conclusion that the pilot initially survived the crash landing is also obvious. So Dennis deployed his parachute near the crash site for protection against the burning sun. If he had died in the accident, his remains would also have been found, but there is still no trace of the Briton. The experts suspect that the young man in his desperation decided to march off and ultimately died in the desert from thirst and exhaustion. Elvis Presley's private plane. The news that a man recently auctioned off a dilapidated private jet for $260,000 may sound a bit strange at first. However, the situation is somewhat different when we consider who the rotten plane once brought from A to B. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. As is well known, he died in 1977, so that his LOCKHEED Jetstar also spent the past decades rusting away in the desert of New Mexico. Elvis had acquired the orange-red aircraft about a year before his death. At that time, the World Star paid $840,000, which corresponds to a current value of around $4.4 million. So if you like, the highest bidder who submitted his bid by phone made a good bargain. Well, at least if you can overlook the missing engines and wheels, the faded paint, and the battered cockpit, of course. What the new owner will do with the Elvis jet is not known. Some users speculate that he might want to turn the plane into a small but nice hotel. Swamp Ghost. The Boeing B-17 was known for its enormous robustness. According to this, the U.S. bomber from World War II was able to stay in the air even in the face of severe damage. But the fact that the aircraft, appropriately named Flying Fortress, did sometimes fall from the sky is shown by the story of the Swamp Ghost. After an attack on Japanese ships on February 23, 1942, pilot Frederick Eaton was forced to make an emergency landing of his B-17 in a swampy area of Papua New Guinea. Fortunately, all crew members were to survive the crash landing and the risky return trip. The orphaned aircraft was rediscovered in 1972, and a few years later, the wreckage would be cleared for importation into the United States. There, the winged swamp spirit was then expertly restored and displayed in various museums. PEGASUS. With the wreckage of the plane trapped in thick snow and ice in Antarctica, it seems almost unbelievable that all 80 people on board survived the crash landing of the plane. In October 1970, the Lockheed Constellation C-121, named Pegasus, had departed New Zealand for the icy continent. There, however, the plane ran into a severe storm, and with visibility deteriorating so drastically, the pilot saw no other way out than to make an emergency landing of the Pegasus in the snow. Miraculously, no occupants were injured. The survivors held out inside the aircraft until rescue workers arrived. However, due to the extreme conditions that prevailed at the site of the emergency landing, it was not possible to recover the aircraft in the aftermath. Douglas C-177D. Departing in 1973, on a supply flight to a radar station in Stoknes, Iceland, the 7-man crew of the Douglas C-177D was forced to make an emergency landing in Solheimsandr as a result of icing. Fortunately, no one was harmed in the incident. While the usable parts were subsequently salvaged and transported away, the rest of the aircraft remained in place until today. In the course of time, the wreckage has become a popular destination for many curious tourists. L-8. Yes, you're right, of course. The L-8 airship is not an airplane. But since its story is so mysterious and exciting, we decided to include the incident in our video today anyway. Then indeed, on August 16, 1942, something happened that is still unique in the history of aviation. L-8 landed on a street in Daly City, California, with its hull limp, its cabin intact, and its engine turned on. The problem? There was no trace of the 2-person crew. What we do know is that the flying ghost ship had previously departed on a routine flight to look for enemy submarines. At 7:42 a.m., the crew reported spotting something unusual in the water and getting to the bottom of it. This was the last radio message L-8 sent, and the 2 occupants were never seen again from then on. What prompted the men to climb out of an intact airship, even leaving the life raft behind, is completely uncertain. Even if the engine had failed, which mind you it did not, they would have been able to jettison ballast and return to the mainland like an improvised balloon. Boeing 737. Since repairing a damaged Boeing 737 was not worthwhile from a financial point of view, the Air Sahara Company decided to sell the unusable aircraft in 2005. As a result, large parts of the interior were cannibalized and purchased by an American corporation. The remaining wreckage of the aircraft was then supposed to become the property of an Indian company based in New Delhi, but it never arrived there. In fact, the truck that was supposed to take the Boeing to its destination in 2007 got stuck on the road during transport. Due to the enormous size of its cargo, it was no longer able to continue its journey. As a result, the discarded aircraft was abandoned and today graces the Nishaland Water Park in Mumbai. Bartini-Beriev VVA-14. Built by the Soviet Union in the 1970s, the Bartini-Beriev VVA-14 was an absolute all-rounder. As such, the aircraft was capable of taking off from the water, flying at high altitudes, and reaching amazing speeds. However, the aircraft was never to get beyond prototype status. When lead designer Robert Bartini died, the project was scrapped. The prototype was then to be transferred to the Moscow Museum. But on the way there was a monumentous accident and severely damaged the aircraft. As a result, the Beriev VVA-14, which stands in the Central Air Force Museum in Moscow, has been missing its wings ever since. Lockheed P-38 Lightning. If you go to a certain beach in Wales, you may catch sight of something conceivably unusual. Instead of fish and shells, what awaits the viewer is the wreckage of an American fighter known among the locals as the Maid of Harlech. Behind its rusty machine lies the story of pilot Robert F. Elliott. In September 1942, he had set off on a training flight when the plane's technology failed. A successful emergency landing and an uninjured pilot later, the region was enriched by a unique attraction. Curtiss C-46. Carlos Leder didn't take work rules too seriously. Okay, granted, since he was responsible for flying tons of cocaine from A to B in the 70s and 80s, there might as well have been no such thing as official work rules at all. As one of Colombia's most famous drug dealers and Pablo Escobar's right-hand man, Leder is known for drinking a little too much. This was also the case in November 1980 when he was drunk on board a Curtiss C-46 and made a bad mistake during a landing approach. The plane did not land on the Bahamas island of Norman's Cay as planned, but in the waters in front of it. While the plane has not left its unexpected landing site to this day, Leder went to a U.S. jail in 1987. However, as he became seriously ill with prostate cancer in the course of time, and also turned state witness against Manuel Noriega, he was to receive an early pardon. At his own request, He was then flown out to his father's home country, Germany. There, he has been cared for by a nonprofit organization since 2020. So folks, now it's your turn. What do you think about the featured aircraft and their background stories? As always, drop us your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback on today's video in the comments below. While you're at it, remember to give us a thumbs up and a subscription to stay up to date from now on. Finally, feel free to take a look at the other exciting posts on our channel that we've linked here in the credits for you. And with that, thanks for watching, take care, and see you next time.